Welcome to Between Over and Next with your hosts, Holli and Robert, a happily married couple who explore the space between what was, what is, and what's to come. From career changes to navigating life's uncertainties, this dynamic duo will empower you to live your happiest life at every age and stage. So, get ready because your journey with Holli and Robert starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Between Over and Next. Hi, Holli.
Hi, Robert. Are you excited?
Yes.
Why?
I guess because I'm recording with you.
Okay, that's one
That's
good
why I'm
reason.
excited.
Robert said to me, Holli, after me presenting a number of topics to him, he said, Holli, I'd like something light. And I said, I agree. So today, it is all about the anticipation of something exciting that's going to happen in our lives, in our family lives. And it's happened for centuries to many other people. We're expecting something in only a few weeks from the recording of this Between Over Next episode, which means we are in that between phase of something that's about to come into this world that will impact and influence your life, my life, and others in our family.
That's correct.
So are you going to share this with our wonderful listeners and viewers?
I am. We are getting a goldfish.
We are. Oh, I'm so excited. This is about the joy and anticipation and excitement that accompanies embarking on a new journey, such as da-da-da-da-da-da.
We're going to be grandparents.
Woohoo! Woohoo! I feel like if we were on the America's Got Talent stage, there would have been tons of streamers, like the golden buzzer would have been hit, and tons of streamers would have come down. How come you don't have that installed in this studio?
No, I will.
Will
shortly.
you? Promise?
Yes.
Today we want to talk about some of the universal feelings that grandparents probably have. We want to reflect a little. We want to share a little bit about our journey thus far. I think our children will be okay with this episode because they have already announced it on Facebook, which makes it official.
Yes, and it's also just a few weeks away. I have to be honest with you, the grandparent label makes me think of my grandparents, which I certainly remember them, I guess, at our age. But my memory of my grandparents was never as young people. I only knew my grandparents as old people, what I considered old then. So I have to tell you, the label of grandparent is the first time, really, that it felt, or I kind of related it only to old. But I know that's not going to be true for us because we're not old. We're just going to be grandparents.
Well, we also don't feel old. And at the same time, we really are 10 years older than our parents were when they became grandparents to our children.
Yes, they were younger grandparents.
As we record this episode,
the only thing that
we have 6 grandparents that are going to become great-grandparents.
Yes.
That is such a blessing.
And I think that's even less on the radar of most people. Yes, there are people that, as they age, are really looking forward to becoming grandparents, as we are. But you rarely hear, people express, well, I can't wait to become a great-grandparent. We have friends, our contemporaries, who graduated high school at the same time as us, that have been grandparents for a while.
But they got married younger. And they had children younger.
It's interesting because for us, it's really novel, and we have friends of ours who have older grandchildren. at this point. So it's very interesting that you enter grandparenthood at different stages of life. If you've had children early and then they're married and have children early, that whole trajectory, and I think the difference, certainly, being a young grandparent or an older grandparent, is you just get up from the floor a little bit slower.
Okay.
That's all.
The child of ours that's having a baby is Lindsay. She is our firstborn. She is our daughter. She is 30 years old. She is married for almost 3 years to Elliot. They are in love, and their love is going to bring their baby into our world, into our universe, into our everything. It's very surreal. There's so many emotions and feelings surrounding this, and they all come from a place of love.
Right. But up until this point, okay, through the whole pregnancy process, it's somewhat transactional because as much as the baby is growing inside, until you meet that baby, there's a certain switch that's thrown that is hard to really explain until you go through that. We just don't know what it's going to be like as the grandparent. I'm just thinking about all the stuff I'm going to buy.
But think about all of the grandparents that we know that are in our lives. And this is everything I've heard for the past months since we learned about this exciting news is just you wait. They said it's like the best ever. It's the best role ever. So, wow, something to really look forward to. I think about you talking about the kind of role that we envision ourselves as grandparents. We're givers. We're givers, right? We're going to buy anything that our children want and that our grandchildren want. Actually, not anything. I really do believe that we know the things that matter most. We love books. We love reading books to our kids, and we're going to love reading books to our grandchildren. Grandparents are known as being the chief spoilers in the family, and that's okay. As soon as we heard the news, I felt like we're going to be the cool grandparents. We're going to be the fun grandparents.
There's also a distinct difference in grandparent relationships. I think there's a direct correlation to, and it makes sense, to the proximity that you are to your grandchildren. And this is not by any means universal, but I just think that the closer you live to your grandchildren, the better chance, hopefully, I hope this is true for most people, the more you'll see your grandchildren or grandparent.
And maybe have a deeper connection with them because of the time you spend together.
Correct. And I think the value becomes the routines, the everyday interactions, whether it's a quick phone call or
even a FaceTime
or coming over. Like we have a neighbor, their granddaughter comes over, it seems like in the afternoon after school for a couple hours, like an hour or two. She's probably coming over, having something to eat, doing a little bit of homework, hanging out a little bit, watching grandma maybe cook what's for dinner or whatever. It's like spending the time with grandparents when it's not like we're going to grandma and grandpa's because it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's Eve. Yes, those special times are great, but it's the mundane, the everyday of the not, like it's not a big thing. It's just hanging out. It's just being with. That to me is the real value. I remember even when we moved from Brooklyn to Staten Island, in the summertime, we drove back to Brooklyn to hang out like almost every day.
So why don't you just tell everybody about your grandparents?
I didn't have a close relationship with my father's parents.
Where did they live?
They were in Brooklyn. And I think part of it was a little bit of lifestyle. My grandfather was Orthodox Jew, and he was very observant. and was close to home because he went to shul and all of that. So our time spent with them was more kind of holiday time. I remember going to my father's parents on the holidays and spending time there when it was like special times, wasn't the everyday times that I had much more with my mother's parents. Like, we didn't really vacation with them or anything. We went to Coney Island, to Washington Baths in the summer, and we would hang out on the block in Brooklyn, and my friends were there. Even when we moved to Staten Island, I guess part of that was my mother's separation from her mother, of wanting to be back in Brooklyn all the time, because it was 40 minutes, 45 minutes away.
Is there anything that you did with your grandparents that you want to do with your grandchildren?
Just the sleepovers. I remember sleeping over my grandparents' house all the time. I don't know if my parents would confirm this or not. Probably Mindy, my sister, would confirm it more. We were, I believe, at my grandparents' every Saturday night while my parents went out. And that was one of the strongest memories I have with my grandparents. We had our ritual for Saturday night was to go out in the evening. I remember it being dark. I guess it was winter time. And we would drive to the newsstand. We would stop at the newsstand. And in the New York area, I don't know if this was true for everywhere, but on Saturday nights,
The Daily
you
News
could
and
get
the New
the
York
Daily
Times.
News, the Sunday Daily News.
Yes, I love doing that.
On Saturday night. And it was always wrapped in the comics.
Mm-hmm.
So I would get to read the comics. But after picking up the paper, we would go to the bagel store. And we would get bagels Saturday night for Sunday. And I remember, I can still see it as vivid as it happened yesterday. Sitting in the back seat of my grandparents' car. I can see my grandparents sitting in the front seat. I'm sitting next to my sister. And we have the newspaper on the seat between us. And I'm holding the bag of hot bagels in my lap. And my sister and I are each eating a hot, plain bagel right out of the bag. And that, I can still smell it. I can still taste it. I can still see it. And that was a regular occurrence.
What about your
with
relationship?
my grandparents.
What about your relationship as you got older? Because when we got married, we only had two grandparents that were with us that walked down the aisle. Your grandpa David and my grandma Ray.
Yeah. My father's mother died when we were young. I don't know if we had even moved to Staten Island yet. But my mother's parents, once my parents, my mother especially, I think, got comfortable in Staten Island, everything flipped, and my grandparents would come to us every weekend because we had put up a pool in the backyard and the barbecue. So my grandparents would come out and spend the weekend with us in Staten Island. That was, and it was, you know, all the time. They would come out a lot.
So my experience with my grandparents, my mother's father died when she was 5 years old, so I never knew my grandpa Hyman. And he was from Poland. And my mother's mother, my grandma Irene, was from Russia. And she died, I think, in her 50s from pancreatic cancer. One of the reasons I ride with Psycho for Survival. And my mother and her mother were very close. And I was around 10 years old when she passed away. I have very, very few memories of that relationship. My father's parents, my grandma Ray and my grandpa Abie, and I did call all of my grandparents grandma and their first name, or grandpa and their first name. So I had my grandma Irene, who passed away when I was around 10, and that was in Brooklyn. And then I moved to Long Island with my parents. And then my father's parents lived in Brooklyn, near Kings Plaza, in a really nice house. My grandma Ray and my grandpa Abie, my father's parents, we saw them, I'd say regularly. We mostly went out for dinner. I do not remember my grandma Ray ever cooking a meal. My grandparents always sent to check for back to school, for Hanukkah, for birthdays. I just remember spending time hanging out at our house with our family members and my cousins. That's what I mostly remember with my grandparents. Different when our parents became grandparents. My parents watched our kids a lot, especially when we traveled for when you were speaking. And we went to your parents all the time. We hung out, whether it was for holidays or otherwise. And we always got together with your sister and the kids. And that's why the cousins are so close.
It also helps when the cousins are kind of around the same age, because that's always a very awkward thing at certain ages when you have cousins that are maybe 10 years apart. A 12 or 13-year-old is not going to hang out with a 4 or 5-year-old.
So we were really fortunate in that your sister and every other year had a baby. And that's really wonderful right now, watching this circle of life with Lindsay and Erica with their babies.
Right, because their babies will be
the same year.
Will be 7 or 8 months apart. Once they're 6 or 7 is nothing. They're essentially the same age.
When I think about the moments that I definitely want to continue, that I think about from generation to generation, is I think about all the birthday parties, the holidays. Hanukkah was always special at your mother's house when the kids were small. So many presents and gifts and toys. The holidays are important,
but I really believe it's the in-betweens. It's the regular stuff. It's the Saturday night, just hanging out, watching a movie, eating pizza, making English muffin pizzas in the toaster oven, going to the refrigerator after dinner and being able to take a big piece of chocolate off of the chocolate bar that they kept in the drawer in the refrigerator. We have these pictures with the kids helping grandfathers shave.
My father would put shaving cream on the kids' faces. That's a great photo. Of course, documenting the times of your life all along the way. When we were younger, especially once we had kids, we were making doubles of all the photos. Today, you could be taking countless photos and video of your children.
Right.
share.
And I think that with grandchildren, there are certain qualities and certain things that you tend to do with your grandparents. And I've said this before, children are always watching and always observing. And I think back as a young person from early on would always be volunteering. I had hundreds of hours logged at Staten Island Hospital as a volunteer. I volunteered for March of Dimes walkathon. I think back to the fact that my grandmother was a huge volunteer. Jewish war veterans, the local political scene in Brooklyn. And I would watch and I would go with her during election time, going door to door, getting signatures, raising money, working with her at the polls.
That's great.
During the elections, back when there wasn't such restrictions, and I would be able to push the lever to reset the voting machine every time someone would go in.
That's
and
very
I
impactful.
Couldn't wait
Very
to do it. And
Robert.
I know for a fact that my love for volunteering, sometimes to our detriment, is because of what I witnessed from my grandparents, my grandmother especially. She worked at the Veterans Hospital. She had her smock that she would wear was covered with pins signifying the hours, hundreds of hours
That's
of time.
wonderful. The cool thing also about being grandparents is sometimes is exposing your grandchildren to first. Like my mother took Lindsay to see Beauty and the Beast. That is something she will always remember. Other opportunities like going into New York City when my parents lived there.
We used to wait Christmas Day. I remember my grandparents in line at Radio City to see the Christmas show. Cold for hours.
But that's an awesome memory. Going to the museums, walking in Manhattan, going on a bus with them. Think about Camp Visiting Day. All the grandparents came.
Yeah.
To see Lindsay and Alex and
it
the
was
cousins.
a schlep, and it was like, oh my God.
And Stony Brook, the hottest days.
That's going to be us, my dear.
Yes, yes.
We're going to be schlepping
But
to Camp Visiting Day.
I am revisiting the moments that our parents showed up, and they did.
We really have to go to Camp Visiting Day?
We're going to Camp
Knowing what it is?
We're going to Camp Visiting Day. Okay. Think about how our parents came to watch Alex's softball games. My parents had taken the kids to the circus. That's so awesome.
You like doing that stuff.
I love it. So we're going to want to do that.
Right.
And we may do it all together, and we may do it separately, depending on what it is. Those music and dance lessons, the recitals that you would go to, inviting the family, the grandparents. We're going to be those people that want to be invited to be part of their lives. A very special memory was when we were at Avon by the Sea. And I remember when my parents came and stayed with us. And that was such a special time together. And when your parents came and visited and we played bocce and we've gone bowling together as a family. When we went to the Nevele with your family. Wow. Ice skating and playing ping pong and miniature golf.
So the overnight experiences become most memorable. Going to sleep and waking up in a different place with your grandparents at their house or them at your house.
You like that when they get older too, but you know what? Another special memory is when the kids were adults going on the cruise for your father's 80th birthday 6 years ago. I mean, that was so special.
What was your memory as a young adult with your grandparents?
It's interesting because I was in my 20s when I think about that. You live under your parents' roof and you experience those family get-togethers. And then you go off to college. And I remember my grandparents visiting me at college.
My grandparents never visited at college.
My Grandma Ray and Grandpa Abe, my father's parents, they came to BU. They came to Boston. I remember I have a photo of it of my grandpa sitting on the steps at Faneuil Hall. I then moved into the city and I was kind of on my own journey in my 20s. I don't remember seeing my grandparents that much. There's something about affection between a grandparent and a grandchild. And my grandfather always used to rub my back. It was something I will always remember. Our parents collectively just love and adore and are so proud of our children. And they have very close relationships. So the relationship our children have with our parents is different than I had with my grandparents.
Yes. And I think that part of that is the world we live in now. Familial relationships are further defined than they ever were before. And due to lots of things, grandparents now play a much different role in children's lives. Quite often, grandparents are raising their grandchildren. Or sometimes there are single parents that rely on grandparents. And there are certain cultures where in a household there are 3 generations living under the same roof. And grandparents are living and raising the children while the parents go out to work.
My grandparents were very generous.
Part of the role of grandparent is a kind of gift giving. Like knowing you could always get a certain thing from your grandmother's pocketbook. She always had certain mints with her. I would go to the Avenue with my grandmother and she'd take me to the toy store. When the running joke was, you could have anything you want in the store as long as it wasn't more than 99 cents. But back then, for $1, you could get a lot of stuff in the toy store.
My grandparents, I remember always going out for Chinese food, and I remember my grandfather loving pistachio ice cream. My grandfather loved ice cream, period. My grandparents bought me my 1979 red Firebird. That was my first car, and that was an amazing gift.
I hope that we'll be able to do stuff like that as well.
Our parents and our grandparents are shaping the way we are ultimately going to approach grandparenting. The things we like, the things we don't like, the traditions that we want to continue. What's going to happen once this baby enters the Suslick world, there's going to be change. And we don't know how Lindsay and Elliot are ultimately going to want to parent. I know that we have been role models and they like a lot of what we do, but they're going to be creating their own path and do what they want, raising their baby. And I think as grandparents, you need to respect that. And you need to be flexible and meet them in the middle. You got to still be parents and guide and advise, but you do need to let them do it their way. And I think we've been very blessed that our parents have allowed us to do it our way. Open communication is key, but it's also about balance because we want to still continue sharing this podcast and playing pickleball and our own social life. But we want the space and the room to be able to enjoy the moments with our new grandchild. We're going to look forward to the babysitting and letting our children have the date nights like we had. We did have a babysitter or the grandparents watch the babies. That's important. Having a date night is important. And I'm looking forward to the babysitting. There's a whole new balancing act that's going to come into focus. Something that is so important, and Lindsay has said it to me, is how much she appreciates that we say 3 simple words. I love you. And it's important to say and exhibit that affection, but to say it. There is so much ahead, and I really do believe some of our best days have not even happened yet, Robert.
Yeah, I mean, we have great days all the time. And I think this is going to be a very new experience, a little bit like getting a new puppy, just more responsibility. And they don't shed as much. But I'm looking forward to adding another role to what I do. I think I'm going to be an excellent grandparent. I hope I'll get to spend as much time as I would like with my grandchild and grandchildren as they come, because I'm hoping we'll have at least a few. But it's nice to see our friends and our family going through similar experiences, and that's what life is about, because as we go through the different ages and stages, you celebrate different things, and generationally it changes, and some of it is brand new and some of it is new again and rather familiar. I would imagine that a lot of the technique of being able to keep a baby asleep in your arms, that motion will come back to me very quickly as I have my grandchild in my arms for the first of many times together. I'm looking forward to it.
And I think you should really end this episode on the importance of documenting the times of our lives.
Yeah, well, now there's no excuse, and I think people are much more apt to record, and it's not something that we have to remind people to do very much. Some people are doing it continuously. Again, I'll go back to it a million times. It's the everyday moments. It's not just the dance recitals. It's not just the birthday parties. It's not just the holidays. It's the sitting and doing homework together. It's laying on the couch watching TV.
I can't wait to push a swing.
Going to the park. We have a neighborhood here that's very conducive to taking a walk with a stroller. We have lots of friends that have their grandchildren at the pool, and it looks like fun.
It's really beginnings all over again. Beginnings 30 years later for us.
Yeah, and when you get tired of them, you just send them home with their parents.
Definitely. There are so many happy, joyous moments to share with you ahead, and we will once this baby is in the world.
Right, because as of the release of this podcast, we're probably less than 3 weeks or so away from that. So I'm sure it will become a source of content for us moving
And we will
forward.
have a special episode once this baby enters our lives.
And we don't know anything about
the
baby,
meaning
in terms of their gender.
Right. Which we're very excited that our kids, Lindsay and Elliot,
didn't want to find out.
Didn't want to find out because it's one of
They
those
wanted
moments.
to do it the old-fashioned way.
Right. It's a baby. And we are looking forward to that experience together.
Going to be exciting. So if you've got any grandparenting advice that you'd like to share with us, make sure that you do so. We love to hear from our listeners, so make sure you do that. And we want to, once again, thank you all for being here with us on Between Over and Next, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Between Over and Next. We hope you enjoyed this episode and found it meaningful and insightful.
If you value it to be worthwhile, please share it with your friends and family.
We would really appreciate it if you could take a moment to write a review for us. Your feedback will help us continue to create content that resonates with you.
And don't forget, in the show notes, you can find all the relevant links mentioned in this episode, from accessing free downloads to visiting our website and more.
If you have any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. Simply send us an email. Our email address is hello@hollyandrobert.com. We're always excited to connect with our listeners.
So until next time, Thank you again for joining us on Between Over and Next.
Thank you for listening to Between Over and Next, the podcast that navigates the twists and turns of life with courage, laughter, and a whole lot of inspiration. Tune in every Tuesday to hang out with Holli and Robert on your favorite podcast platform. Visit hollyandrobert.com and follow them on social media to ignite your passion and fuel your dreams.